Hey guys, welcome back, and today we're going to be knocking out this tic-tac-toe game. I honestly promise you guys that my tongue will twist before the end of this video, so try your best not to laugh at me. But yeah, this is the game we're going to be coding today, and I've went ahead and created my HTML file, CSS file, and JavaScript logic file. So I suggest you go ahead and do that. And if you're rocking Visual Studio Code like I'm rocking it, I highly suggest installing an extension called Live Server if you haven't done so. And this server of this extension is going to allow us to run our HTML file locally on the live server. So I highly suggest going ahead and do that if you have done that, or if you have a different editor that you're using and you know how to run HTML files locally. Go ahead and do you. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead in my index.html file, and because I'm using Emmet with my Visual Studio Code, I can just go ahead and do an exclamation mark, and that is gonna generate my doc type HTML for me, and I have my entire HTML file here. And I'm just gonna head and change the title, call it tic-tac-toe. And what I'm going to do inside of this tic-tac-toe, I'm going to create a container. So I'm going to go ahead and say container, and inside of this container I'm going to have an h1, and I'm also going to have a button. So this button is going to be my restart button, and then my h1 is going to be my title, which I'm going to call, yes, you guessed it, the game's name, tic-tac-toe. That is the second time my tongue hasn't twisted, so let's see how far I can go with this without twisting my tongue. So I'm going to give this one an ID, which is I'm just going to name player text, and then also my button I'm going to give an ID because I'm going to need to hook into this button, which I'm just going to call restart btn for button. And then inside of this container, I need to create these 9 blocks over here. And the way I'm going to do that, I'm going to create a container firstly. I'm going to give it an ID of gameboard, if I can spell gameboard. Inside of this div, I'm going to have 9 divs. So I'm going to have a div with class box, and all of them are going to have IDs. So if I do hashtag $, what it's going to do is it's going to generate a div with an ID for me, and I can do this by doing hashtag $times 9, and it's going to create 9 divs for me, and each with a unique ID. Isn't that great? And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to remove the last div over here, because what I want to do is I want my divs actually to start counting from 0 instead of 1. And the reason for that is I'm going to use JavaScript to come get all of these elements and set them as an array, and we all know that JavaScript starts counting from 0 instead of 1, so it's going to make sense if my IDs kind of matched up with the array index later on in this game. So let me save this, and now that I've saved it, I'm going to go to my HTML file, right click, open with Live Server, and then just wait a couple of seconds, and as you guys can see there, I have my tic-tac-toe live server. And then the only thing that I'm also going to copy and paste over here is I'm using a Google font, so I'm just going to paste that font over there, Google font. I hit Ctrl B to close my sidebar in case you're wondering, and I'm going to link to my CSS file by saying link CSS, and my CSS is called styles.css. I'm going to do the same thing right at the bottom by linking to my JavaScript file by going script source, and then I'm going to do gamelogic.js. If I save this, you guys can see now that I've saved it, something weird is happening. The font is picking up, the background color is picking up, but you have all of this weird borders, which makes no sense at all. So, and the reason for that, probably because of this class, I'm going to save it. And there we go. Now you guys are wondering as to why is this looking like this already. To save us some time, I went ahead and pasted my CSS inside of this file so that I don't have to write it out, but I am going to explain it. So you guys know by now, this is just resetting all of the DOM rules. I created some variables, one called orange for my text and the one called the winning blocks for a highlighted background. For when a user has 3 in a row, we want to give some sort of indication that that user has won. And then I have my background, I have my font family I'm using, everything else. You guys can just pause this video if you want to copy this part. I'm just going to scroll down really slow. And as you guys remember, my game board is just a fixed width I'm setting, display flex, then wrap flex wrap elements so that they wrap to a second row. But what I want to bring your attention to is basically this class over here, this box class, which is all of these boxes. So I'm just going to comment this out, and this is going to make much more sense if I do that. As you guys can see, I'm setting each box of the 9 boxes a fixed height and a fixed width, doing display flex, align item center, so that whenever text showing here, they are in the center vertically and horizontally of this box. And that's why I'm using that justify content and align items center. But what I'm doing is all of the 9 boxes, I'm setting a border right and a border bottom for all 9 of them. So as you can see, all of them has a border right and a border bottom, no border left, no border top, which means that on these boxes, which are at the last row, I'm going to have to remove the border right, and at these boxes right at the bottom, I'm going to have to remove the border bottom. And that's where this piece of CSS comes in. So basically what this piece of CSS does, it's say for each third child that has this box class, so it's going to count and say 1 2 3. Okay, I made the third child. What do I need to do? I need to remove the border right, and it's going to remove that border, and it's going to count 1 2 3. Third one, remove the border right. Same here, 1 2 3, remove the border right. And if I comment this one out just to see that effect, and you guys can see now we don't have the border right removed, but we are stuck with the borders here at the bottom. So if I uncomment this one here, which is going to take care for borders at the bottom, so what this one says is count till at the 6th child that has this class, right? And then every other div that has the box class after the 6th one, just remove the border bottom. So basically what I'm telling you to do, I'm saying count 6 divs for me, and once you've reached 6 divs, every other div that has this box class, remove the border bottom. So that's going to go 1 2 3 4 5 6, and then say okay, starting from 7, I'm removing the border bottom. So if I save this, you guys will see no border bottom there. And just to illustrate this point further, if I go ahead and copy this last 3, so I'm just copying that last 3. If I save them, you will see that it adds those divs, but they don't have any border bottom because it already counted to 6 and removes all the border bottom. So that is my CSS right over there, and I'm just styling my button using my button selector, and I'm adding a little hover effect on my button. So if I do that, you guys see that it has this little animation going on. So that's our CSS. And now to the meaty gritty part, or the whole reason why you clicked on the thumbnail in the first place, and that was to click on the like button and click on the subscribe button if you haven't done so, in order not to miss out any other future tutorials or video that I may publish on this channel. Now that you have done that, let's go ahead and create the logic of this game. So we know we need a couple of variables, and we're going to set that variables right off the bat. And the first one I want to do is I want to get this player text, I want to get the button, and I want to get this 9 blocks or 9 div tags. So let's start there. I'm going to create one. I'm going to say let player text equal to document.get element by ID, and that ID was player text. Second one I'm going to do, I'm going to say let restart button equal to document.get element by ID, and that ID is exactly that, restart btn for restart button. And now I want to go ahead and get these 9 blocks. So I'm going to go ahead and say let boxes, basically I'm just going to call it boxes, equal to document dot get elements by name. So get elements by class name. So all the elements that has this class name, which is called box, I'm getting all of those elements. And what you can do over here, I'm just going to say console.log boxes just to show you guys what's happening. I'm going to do F12 to go into my inspect element, and I'm getting an HTML collection of 9 divs. Now I don't want an HTML collection because there's basically, yes, I can go ahead and hook up some event listeners and functionality to them, but I'm going to have to do it all one by one, which can have this file looking like a Facebook application file, which is not what we want. We wanted to keep it short, we want to keep it simple. And how we're going to do that is by converting this HTML collection into an array and saving that into our boxes variable. And the way we can do that is actually in JavaScript, there's a built-in function called array and then a method on it called from. So this one says create an array from an array-like object. And as we have seen in our console.log, that these documents.get elements by class name, all of these boxes are array-like because they're a collection of more than one document element basically. So if I go ahead and do that and save it now, and let's do inspect element, you guys will see instead of having an HTML collection, now I have an array with 9 elements in it, and that's what we want. So now that I've gone ahead and get my elements from the document, I need to start looking at creating some functionality for our game. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to set up a variable called const o underscore, let's do it capital letter text, and all of the only thing, this is going to be just my O letter. I'm going to do the same one for my X letter. So I'm just going to say const X, and then I'm going to do quotation mark capital X. And then I'm going to go to let current player. So I'm going to do the play that's currently playing. So I'm going to say current player is equal to, I'm just going to set it to X. So we're going to start our game off with the X text basically. And then the next thing I want to do now is I want to be able to keep track of which block was clicked of this 9 blocks. So if a user clicks this one, I want to be able to save that somewhere so that I don't allow him to select this again, so that X doesn't override O on this, or O doesn't override X on this block. And how I'm going to do that, I'm going to create a variable. So I'm going to say let, I don't know why I created a space there, let spaces, so basically it's going to be my 9 spaces, is equal to, so an array. So I want to have an array and an array of 9. So fill this empty array, or create an array with me with 9 index or 9 spaces, and fill that 9 spaces basically with null. So spaces is basically going to be an array. So if I do console.log spaces, so spaces is going to be an array which is the same size as boxes, but instead of having HTML collections or HTML elements, it's going to have 9 null basically spaces, empty spaces. So if I save that, if I go there to F12, you guys can see, let me just remove that, we don't need that anymore. Save it. So if you look at spaces now, you guys will see that it's an array with null, but also 9. So it has 9 null spaces in order to be filled in with this 9 boxes over here. So now that we have our variables all set up, let's start looking at the game itself. So what I want to do is I want to be able to start this game. So I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call it start game, which is going to be an arrow function. And basically when the game starts, what I want to do is I want to loop over all of this one and just add an event listener to each one of these DOM elements. And how I'm going to go do that, I'm going to say boxes dot for each of those boxes. So I'm going to say box, and basically I'm going to do box dot add an event listener to this, and the event is going to be listened to, it's called click. And once you click on the event, I want you to run a function, and I'm going to call box clicked. So basically it's in the name. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and create that box clicked function. So I'm going to say function box clicked, and then I'm going to pass in a parameter on this box click. And what I can do here is do a console.log, and that console is going to log the current clicked item. So I'm going to say current clicked event and dot target and log that out. And in order for us to see that in the console, let me just run that start function, start game function right at the bottom. Let's click save. Let's go over here, open up our console. So if I click on this block over here, we should be able to see that div with an ID 1. So what we want is basically that ID. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this. I'm going to leave the start game right at the bottom. We have our start game function, which adds an event listener to each of the boxes for each of these 9 boxes. So the first thing we want to do is actually just save out that ID. So I can go ahead and say const ID is equal to e.target.id. So E is what is being passed through over here, which is the entire DOM element of the box. And I'm just saying target, its ID, which would be the ID in the HTML that we gave it. Basically, I'm saving that ID inside of this variable. And then the first if statement that I want to create is basically check if our spaces array, which is filled with null, doesn't contain this ID. So I'm going to say if spaces at current index of ID, basically. So this can be 0 up to 9. So in this current index, if this spaces is not equal to null, is equal to null, basically, that's what I'm saying. If this index is equal to null, which means that it hasn't been filled with an ID, we can go ahead and continue. So what we want to do is basically fill that space first thing first. So I'm going to say fill spaces at current index of ID with current player. So what I'm saying is if it array 0, make array 0 either equal to X or equal to 0. Or if it's ID 1, so spaces at index 1, make it either X or 0. That's basically what I'm saying. I'm filling that space in with something, so it's not null anymore. And then what I want to do, I'm going to say E dot target dot inner text. So I'm changing the value or the inner text of this div equal to current players in order to give some sort of feedback to the user. So with that, I can basically go ahead and just do one more logic to say now we need to do an if statement in order to change between XO. And how we can do that is say current player. So we take the current player variable, we say it's equal to whatever the following if statement is going to return. So if current player, keep in mind this is an if statement, if current player is equal to X text. So if this variable is equal to X text, then do the following. So if that's equal to X text, change it to O text, or else change it to X text, and save either O text or X text inside of the variables. We are overriding what's currently in here. So if I save that, so if I click on the first block, I'll have X, which is correct, and then this should have taken effect now to change my current player to O. So if I click here, I should have O, and that way I can click on multiple doing XO, XO, XO. Cool. So that makes sense. So the next thing we're going to do basically in order to finish off this game is to do a player has one function and also resetting a basically reset button. So what I'm going to do is start out with resetting the game. So right here at the bottom, I'm going to call that restart button. I'm going to add an event to it. So add event listener, same event, which is a click event. And once someone click this, I want to run a function called restart. And let me create that function called restart right here at the bottom. And what my restart function will do basically is going to clear out everything here and also clear out my array, my spaces array. So what I want to do, I want to say spaces dot fill. So fill up this array with the value null basically. So strip out everything that was currently in that array and make that array again just nulls. That's what my restart function does. And then I want to do box. So I'm going to loop over this boxes dot for each box. I'm going to say box. And what I want to remove in each of these boxes is just this XOXO text and set it back to blank. So I can go and say box dot inner text is equal to nothing. And then in my restart, I'm going to go ahead and reset my current player as well to our default current player. So I can go ahead and do that and say current player is equal to X text. That's our default current player. And that's our restart button for now. So if I save this and I do XOXOXO and I click on restart, I'm not seeing anything. Let's do uncode reference boxes is not defined. I misspelled boxes. Save it, close it, let's test it again. XOXOXO, let's do restart, and everything cleared out the way we wanted it. So that's our restart function done. So now what we need to do is we need to go ahead and run and create that player has one function. So we need a statement over here. So I'm going to create a function called player has one, and that's going to be my function. And then once a player has one, I just want to set the following. So if a player has one, I want to set this title text to the current player that has one, and that I can do by doing backticks dollar curly braces, and I'm going to say current player has one, basically. So I'd either say X has one or O has one. This is this text right here on top. And now that we have set this text, we actually need to reset it again once someone clicks restart, which makes sense, right? And we can go ahead and do that right here at the bottom by doing player text and resetting back to the way it was. And that's a simple string tic tac toe. So I'm resetting what I've done here on top. And then next thing I want to do, I just want to go ahead and do this player has one function. Let's go create that function. So I'm going to create a function called player has one, which takes in no params. But before I continue with this function, I'm going to create a variable right here on top, and let me quickly explain this variable. So with tic-tac-toe, there are certain combinations that the player needs to hit. For instance, have X in a row, or X aligned vertically, horizontally, or even like from top left to bottom right in order to win the game. So there are certain combinations that a user needs to hit in order to win the game, and we're going to go ahead and create those combinations first. So I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to say let's call it winning combos. I'm just going to create winning combos, and basically this is going to be an array, right? So this array is going to contain the winning combination array. So basically it's going to array containing 0, 1, 2, which is basically a winning combination, or 3, 4, 5, which is a winning combination, or 6, 7, 8, which is also a winning combination. So all of those different combinations, we're going to save them in the array. And I'm going to go ahead and do that right now by creating that. I'm going to say 0, 1, 2, and I'm going to go ahead and kind of speed up the video in this part. Yeah, and hopefully I got all the winning combinations over there. And what we're going to do is we want to be able to check, does the user X currently fill all 3 of the spaces, and if so, that user has one. So the current player has one, and for us to do that, you're going to have to loop over that winning combination. So I'm going to just say for, which is not what I want, so I'm going to say for of, and this is the one I want, iteration of object, and I'm going to say that my current object, or basically my array, is this winning combo. I'm going to paste it there, and then my const, or my current array, which is condition, I'm going to check that condition. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say let create an array, or not an array, I'm basically destructuring this array. So I'm taking the variables out of that array. So I'm saying A, B, C is equal to condition. So I'm destructuring this array, which can be that one or that one or that one, and I'm saying save each value of this array inside of these three variables. So A can be anything between 0, 3, 6, 0, 1, 2, 0, 2. Same goes for B, same goes for C. And that's what I'm doing in that destructuring. And then I'm going to do an if statement. So first thing first, I'm going to check my spaces, which is this array over here that gets filled with an ID. So I'm going to say spaces at A, so at position A, so that could be X or O. And I'm going to say if that and I'm going to do another if statement, basically another condition inside of this condition, spaces A, sorry, that's supposed to be spaces A is equal to spaces B. So what I'm doing here, I'm saying the array spaces at position A, which basically is either X or O, must be equal to the array spaces at position B. So if this is A and if this is O and this is X, then this is invalid. Don't even go and check this. But if this is X and this is X, and then we need to go ahead and do another check to say and spaces array at position A is also equal to spaces array at position C. So I'm checking all three spaces over here, and the three spaces I'm checking is A, which could be 0, 3, 6, 0, 1, 2, 0, 2 according to this combination, and I'm saying check is the letter X in here. If that is X, check then if spaces B, which can be 1, 4, 7, must also be equal to X. If this evaluates to be true, go ahead and check then. Okay, now we know we currently have X at spaces A at the index of spaces at the index of the spaces array. So we need to check that C, so the last combination over here, which can be 2, 5, 8, 6, is also the letter X or the letter O. And if all of this, I'm just going to hit Control B just to close that up. If all of this evaluates to be true, meaning that the spaces array at index A and at index B and at index C, all of them have X, 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 then the player has won with that combination. So here what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say return that array. So return that winning combination array, and this is my winning combination array, and I'm returning that. And if this for loop doesn't evaluate to be true, then return false. Okay, meaning that the user hasn't won or no one has won. So if I go up here in my player and I know that this is not equal to false, meaning that this false here wasn't returned but an array was returned, that user has won. So now I need to do something with that array, and what you're going to do with that array is just create a new variable which calls, just going to call it winning blocks, and then my winning blocks is going to be equal to player has won function, that array that has been returned. And then what I'm going to do, I'm just going to say winning blocks is equal to, or basically actually to map over this in order to give them like a type of indication that they have won. But in order to do so, I need to go and grab that CSS variable. So if I go right over here in my root, I created a variable called the winning blocks with a highlight background in order to highlight the blocks that has actually the winning combination, and I need to come get or grab this over here. And let's go ahead and do that in our JavaScript. I'm going to scroll right on top, and just below boxes, I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it winner, just go winner indicator is equal to get computed style of the current document. So I can say document.body, and I'm going to say get property value. and then the value that I want to get is dash dash. Let's go back here, let's get that variable. So I'm just going to copy this winning blocks variable, I'm going to paste it over here, and this allows me to use this CSS style in my JavaScript. Basically save it. So my winning indicator will be this style over here. So I can go ahead and change this at a later stage to whatever I want it to be, and then this variable will update to contain that value, and we're going to use that variable right here in order to indicate who has won. And how we're going to do that is by mapping over this array which was returned over here. So let's quickly check that array. So we have console.log winning blocks, say save, let's do inspect element. So if I open this up, I actually need to play the game first, say XOXOX, and as you guys can see, I return an array of 0 1 2 3, which basically is those three, which is correct. But I could also get XOXOX, and it gives me 0 4 8, which is basically also a winning combination. And now what I want to do is I want to map over this array, position 0, position 4, and position 8, and apply a CSS style to those blocks. And that's what I'm going to do next over here. Let's close this, remove this console.log, and do winning blocks dot map, and I'm mapping over each blocks. So I can say block, and each one of this block, let's say boxes, basically at current box dot style dot background color is equal to in the winning indicator. Okay, just to quickly explain what's happening here. This is supposed to be box and not whatever I called it. So basically what's happening here, I'm mapping over this array, right? And I'm saying for each one of this winning combination, let's go back to the boxes array. If you go back up, if you remember correctly, our boxes array was each of this div elements over here, what's each of this HTML elements, right? So I'm getting those 9 elements, and I'm saying at this position, which could be 0 1 2, and then I'm saying, okay, at box 0 1, add the style background winning indicator. At box 0 2, add the style winning indicator. That's basically what I'm doing over here. I'm looping over all of these boxes, getting the current index of the array, and then it's adding a background style to it. And seeing that the user has won, we don't want to go and change this to X or O because user has won. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to return out of this entire function. So if I save that, and let's see if that works, I'm going to do XOXOX, and we have our background highlighted for our winning game. And I think that is about it for this tutorial. The only thing I want to do now is that when I hit my restart button, that color doesn't change back. So we need to remove that background style as well for each of those boxes. And luckily we're already looping through all these 9 boxes in order to reset the inner text. So we can just use the same thing to say box.style dot background color and set that background color back to nothing. So save that, and let's do a winning combination again. We have it, say restart, everything resets, and that is your tic-tac-toe game. I knew my tongue was gonna twist before the end of this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, I highly suggest clicking on the subscribe button so that you don't miss any of my content when I publish. Smash that like button so that other guys just like you learning JavaScript can see this content. And as with all of my videos, I left a little issue for you guys to go ahead and solve with this game, and that is basically the following. If a user wins this game for some weird reason, I have a winner, but I can still click on the next block. which should not happen, right? So once the game has ended, once the user has won, we need to disable any remaining block of this 9 blocks so that the user cannot click on any remaining block. And if there is no user, we also need to indicate that there was no user. Go ahead guys and enjoy the rest of your day, and always stay safe.